Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Raquel from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create film courses to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week we interview film professionals to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by filmmaker and musician Nik Fackler, whose work includes Lovely Still, Sick Birds Die Easy, and he's done over 20 music videos. Welcome to the show, Nik.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
I want to ask you, so going through your work, it feels like you're very inspired by experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, how, like, are you a fan of experimental filmmakers? Is there any experimental filmmakers that really influence you as a creator, or I guess musicians, because you also are a musician?
Yeah, I think more on the music side. I think, you sort of get to a point with music where, like, I was raised in a musical family, so I was introduced to lots of music really early on, kind of being fed it, and then, it's like I'm always looking for the next musical thing, and kind of getting like going from like into like pop music in the 60s and 70s, and electronic music, into like punk music, and then into like prog rock and metal, and like searching and searching. And then I think a lot of eventually you end up finding like getting more into like drone and experiment, like what's next? Like what can feed me? And I think with music especially, that has fed me a lot, especially being a writer, finding music that, rather than being something right on the surface, you have to sort of let go into it and go deeper into it to let it affect you. And then sometimes that can affect you more deeply. I'm always trying to be affected by music deeply, because that will in turn inform my writing and make me do something more authentic when I'm working on screenplays and things like that. So something like Lovely Still, which was like a holiday film, I actually like listened to a lot of holiday music and holiday theme music to like get into that place. And then, now a lot of times it's just finding whatever new, like John Luther Adams really inspired me. I saw him at Big Ears Festival. And so yeah, that's kind of what I'm searching for. Experimental film, not as much. I'm aware of it, and I've noticed that there's more filmmakers doing it on like a kind of using horror film as a way to do experiments with filmmaking. And I think that's really interesting. And like A24 films seem to be doing a lot of that. So definitely aware of it. But I always just am looking for something new, whether it's music or film, and you got to experiment to find those things.
Because I watched your dance film, Hidden Places.
The
And
series, there's like 3 of them.
yeah, so
Yeah.
how, in that sense, like, how did you work with the choreographer to sort of figure out what the arc for the film was going to be, or the series, and sort of, I guess what I'm trying to understand is sort of working with the choreographer, but also because you're going to be putting effects in, because there's like effects where like the body sort of splits into 3 and what have you. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, how do you communicate with your choreographer? What was that working relationship like?
I'm very close with the choreographer because she's my wife. So that was a very, this is our attempt at collaborating together, and which was ended up being perfect for me, because I didn't really understand how I was going to do these films at first. And she sort of pushed me to be like, let's try this. And at first we did these other little projects where the idea behind them was, we're going to choreograph a dance, Nik, and then you film it, and then we want you to re-edit it so it's not the same dance anymore. And that sounded really interesting to me, and that kind of started me on this path of like taking A to Z choreographed dance, and then being, well, what if I take X and put it here, and what if I take M and put it here, and just create a whole new formula for it. Like, I sort of become the choreographer in the editing room. And that led to these films, which were, it would always start out with a concept that, you know, the dancers would bring to me and say, okay, this one is going to be about whatever, you know, reality. This one's going to be, that's the basis of it. So now take that and then create a story. So then I would create a sort of beginning, middle, and end of a story. And I would write up a script that was usually like 15 pages long. And then on one of the script pages, I would say, now this character is going to have a really intense, you know, experience that has to do with regret and pain and whatever, you know, these words. And then I would give that to the dancers, and they would base choreography around those words in the script. And then we kind of would keep going back and forth, and everything would develop slowly. Like I would then go look at the choreography, and then I would take information from that and put it back into the script. And it became this sort of like back and forth until we, of course, we were on set and then shooting it the best we can as like low budget experimental filmmakers, and then get into the editing room, and then there's no rules anymore. Then throw everything out the window. You know,
So did you guys still communicate during the editing, or were you sort of on your own, or because
they would usually check out once I started editing, and they just sort of trusted me to do what I do and experiment. And I would definitely show them cuts, you know, and they would, you know, check it out, or my wife would look at it and say like, this part doesn't make sense. The constant argument that would happen between us is I would want to put more story in, and she would want to be taking story out. I think with modern dancers, like the vagueness is the power of it, which is what I love. But I am also like, I just give it a little bit more story. You know, we don't need dialogue, but like, what if, you know, there's this object that keeps coming up that symbolizes something, and like that's enough to tell this story. So it's all about me wanting to me presenting this story and then whittling it down to its simplest form, and trying to tell the emotions of that simple story through dance. And then through that, we created these films that I think what I learned right off the bat is that the more you keep a story simple and tell it through dance without dialogue, the more the audience watching it sort of projects themselves onto it. And it almost becomes like therapy for a lot of people who I've talked to, where it's like, I just had a death in the family, and this film really was this film about death? Is this film about death? And I, you know, and then other person would be like, I just went through a breakup, or I just went through this, or I had this, you know, the experience of some childhood trauma or something like that. So that's what I really like about modern dance, and what I was trying to sort of make with these films as well.
Well, it's interesting because it's very it made me think about like traditional montage theory, where it's like you're just what you were saying, your wife was saying, like, here's the structure, and then you could take it and move it around. You're juxtaposing things drastically opposed to each other potentially, and what have you. Were you, because you said you grew up in a music family, but were you a fan of like the Soviet era montage experiments and what have you?
No, I've never heard of them. They
Okay.
sound great. I mean, the most I know of like that part of the world in cinema is like Tarkovsky and things like that. But the experiments, no. I mean, there is one Russian film that was all shot in this. I can't remember the name of it. It's like a single shot, and it's going through some.
Oh, the Russian Ark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are some, and those are the films I love. I love films like that. You know, I love films that are doing something new with cinema. But maybe tell me more about the Russian. Maybe I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, it's just basically in the 20s. There was a group of Soviet filmmakers who started experimenting and trying to come up with a new language for cinema. And so it's all based on juxtaposition. So the image in and of itself has a meaning, and then you juxtapose it with another image with its own meaning, and it creates an idea in the audience's head.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was thinking with your stuff. You're taking two separate dance movements and juxtaposing them to create a new meaning.
And I did try to create, you know, because there's no dialogue, and it's they're very abstract stories in a way. I like to tell films the way that people think, you know, like rather than having the film takes place in reality, but my experience of being alive is half of it is through my eyes and the other half's behind them. And so these films, I try to sort of have that experience while you're watching the film, where like you're with the character, but you can also be inside the character's head, and it's um, the surreal life experience that I think we all kind of share,
Mhm.
and just trying to sort of translate that into film somehow, and the importance of a symbol. You know, I try to use, rather than using words, using symbols. Like, what is this? In one of the films, Waiting for Reality, it's like, what does this rose mean? It's this
Mhm.
repetitive thing. There's like a shadow in the corner. What does that mean? And if you can think of, through color and through striking solid images, I think you can sort of trigger things in people, whether
Mhm.
it's an emotion or a memory, and then they can use that in the film as their experience of the film, and make the
Interesting.
story up themselves in a way, tell their own story.
So when you're doing something like the dance series, you know, your wife is choreographer. Sorry.
Mm.
Um, how big's your crew? Is it usually, do you keep it tight down to just you shooting, or is it
It's
larger?
very tight. I mean, the budgets are low, you know,
Yeah.
like, oh God, how great it would be to have $1 million to shoot an experimental dance film, but that just isn't the way it is. So keeping the budget low, you know, still paying everybody and respecting everyone's time, but you know, the crews are very small. It's usually myself, Ben Dricky was the DP on all three of them, an
Mhm.
AC of some sort, and like some swing person usually,
Yeah.
and like a PA, you know, and then occasionally we'll have like a, you know, and then a producer. And sometimes my wife was the producer as well as the choreographer. And she would hate me if I said she was the only choreographer. Her what she does is a collective force. So she's definitely the driving force behind it, but it's a collective of dancers that work together to create movement. Um, so yeah, so it's a very small crew, like 4 or 5 person crew
Mhm.
tops, because that's all we can afford.
Yeah.
And then it just comes down to taking my big ideas. And maybe that's another part of the style, is like, here's this big idea. Like in one of them, I wanted to like strap one of the dancers up on the roof, and that was going to be the opening shot. And it was just too expensive. We couldn't hire a
Mhm.
crew to get her safely up there. But then through, you know, being confined by budget makes you, you know, you adapt and improve. Like that's
Mhm.
the motto, like adapt, come up with an even better idea than the original one. And that's kind of the story of my life as a filmmaker. Honestly, I've never had the pleasure of having a big enough budget to do the things that I want to do.
Well, it's interesting because I've always personally felt that constraints, when a director or a creator is under constraints, that's usually when the best
I agree.
creation comes, right? Because they have to make it work somehow.
Yeah, it's where you get tested. It's you're tested as a craftsperson. Like, how is your craft?
Hmm.
And that's where the magic happens too. I think, you know, that's where the like, when everything's all laid out, I assume it's never happened for me, but I assume when everything's all laid out perfect for you, you just go and you shoot it and it's a job. When
Hmm.
there's everything's laid out, but you can only do so much and you're limited, you have to really be thinking on your feet and thinking on the fly, and you're allowing, you know, the spirit of cinema to just guide you, and you got to
Hmm.
trust it. At least that's what I do. You know, I have a sort of philosophy of, this is meant to happen, so let's roll with it and let's see what we were supposed to be shooting in the first place, rather than just laying back and letting a 40-person crew, you know, accomplish everything for you.
Yeah. So how do you approach a new project? Like, because like when I watched your music videos, they're all different from your dance, which is different from your Christmas movie. So
Hmm.
how do you like to approach a project when you're first starting?
Inspiration, you know, finding something that inspires me.
Mhm.
Because if it doesn't inspire you, it's harder to get there. The place that I want to be at when I'm creating, the
Mhm.
like state of mind that I want to be in when I'm making a film or editing a film, I need to be inspired, or at least at a minimum interested.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm always searching for that. Like, what am I inspired by right now? Like, what visuals are inspiring me right now? What music is inspiring me right now? And what topics of conversation are on my mind, that I uh, could go deep with
Mhm.
as a person. And then through that depth, hopefully, you know, it's the process becomes easier if
Mhm.
you have those things. You know, if you're struggling to be inspired, it's going to be a struggle the whole time you're making the
Now,
whatever.
when I've talked to like cinematographers or colorists, they tend to keep books of photos or paintings and things that inspire them.
Mm-hmm.
So is it the same thing? Like, do you have an
Oh yeah.
ongoing
Oh yeah. All
collection?
over the place. What do we got here? Oh, this guy's good. Maxfield Parrish. You ever see some
No,
Maxfield
no.
Parrish? He's a painter. He's beautiful,
Oh
beautiful
wow.
paintings. You recognize him. It's all like his famous one is like they kind of look like this. They're
Oh yeah.
very,
Yeah.
but this is I was really inspired in looking at oh, this is a pretty famous one. You know, it's
Okay. Yeah.
um, you know, inspired by that. I've got before Pinterest kind of changed their thing that all these social media companies do. They just all end up being big commercials. But Pinterest, I used to have like hundreds of Pinterest boards, you know, and like that would be
Same.
something that would be a constant for me. Like I'm just gonna go through Pinterest and like find what I'm into and then collect it. And then when a project comes along, I'd be like, oh, this is my chance to like go after this style that I've been interested in, you know, or, you know, go after this kind of quality of cinema. And same with music, you know, I've got playlists and playlists of just like stuff that I'm into, you know, like aesthetics and moods.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can be looking at it, and as I do like that stuff, like if I can be like looking at an image that like pops up on the internet and all of a sudden it like sparks something in me, like I save it right away, you know, and keep it for another day. And so when I am working with a cinematographer, I already have the mood board ready, you know.
Interesting. Now, how do you approach, because you did the feature film, how would you approach feature film differently than your music videos?
Mm, I consider feature films like the peak of what I consider filmmaking, you know, like
Mhm.
that's just how I was raised. I'm sure there will be new things coming along that we should
Yeah.
all keep an eye on. But for me, feature films were always the like pinnacle of
Hmm.
what I want to be doing and what filmmaking is. More than like a series or something. Um, so that's when I'm approaching a feature film, then my whole life becomes about that, you know, and that is everything else stops and I need to completely give myself to the feature film and everything in my life is about it. You know, every walk I take and every thought I have needs to be about this film and telling this story. So when a feature film, I've only done two and I've got
Hmm.
three more written that are in various stages of development right now. One's with Hulu, oof, and then one is getting cast and one's being financed and I'm gonna go shoot it in Italy. So there's these three films I'm hoping just to like do back to back to back
Hmm.
to make up for lost time because I was a musician. Uh, so as soon as one of those hits and one of those connects, like in the fall is the plan right now, like that will be my life and everything will be about that.
So what do you know, like, is there a particular genre you want to work in or a particular style of filmmaking?
No, I want to do it all. I just like what we talked about before. I
Yeah.
like one of the films is a children's film based on this graphic novel behind me, based on Tony Millionaire's Uncle Gabby. And
Hmm.
this is like scratching the itch for me of like Hayao Miyazaki and Dark Crystal
Yeah.
and children's films that have like a darker edge to them. It's going to be a puppet based film, and I
Oh,
want to
sweet.
like work with puppets and but still do a, you know, make a beautiful heart wrenching story for children and adults. And then I've got like a musical that I'm working on. It's like a dramatic musical. And then I've got a like a sci-fi film that that's the one with Hulu. And I did a short film called Fountain that just released over the holidays
Hmm.
on Hulu. And then that's part of a bigger feature called Beyond Us. That's sort of like a Blade Runner meets Gummo kind of film. Like where you know we every time we see like a cyberpunk sci-fi movie, it's some giant city. Like what did it look like in small town Nebraska?
Yeah.
Um, so they're all three very different films, and you know that's just who I am, and at this point I have to commit to it. You know, I look back when I made Lovely Still when I was young, and I got an agent. I still have the same agent at William Morris, and right off the bat, I started getting all these scripts that were like romantic films, romantic dramas, or you know, stuff that because I made Lovely Still, that was like a romantic film, even though it's experimental because I was 23 making a film about like 80-year-olds in love. That's everybody, and you know, and the sort of like quality of me as a 23-year-old was like, I'm never gonna do a romantic film ever again. Don't send me any of those scripts. And because of that, my agent and manager were like, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I want to do a puppet movie. And they're, you know, they didn't know what to do with it. And maybe I slightly have some regrets that I should have just taken one of those films, and so I could be continuing my career. But I'm leaning into it now. I'm just going to try to make different films. And
yeah, but there's like so many directors who fought for that, their vision, right? Like it wasn't like, I think about Kubrick and like how many films he made. You know, he took a lot of time in between,
yeah,
again, to follow his vision as opposed to.
yeah, I don't want this to turn into a job where I'm just making similar films and just like pumping them out. I really want to explore different types of filmmaking, you know, and challenges, you know, challenge myself as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And if I fail, that's okay because I was challenged, which is why in the end I ended up doing a documentary after experimental psychedelic documentary in Africa. But that was my choice of like, you know what, I'm going to do something completely different than Lovely Still. So that way I can just really set up that this is who I'm going to be as a filmmaker and continue on that path.
Interesting. I have one last question for you.
Sure.
We've been stuck in this pandemic for 2 years. Depending on where you are in the world, you might be in quarantine, you might be out of quarantine. Is there a film or a show you've discovered over the last couple of years that people should check out?
Yeah, I mean, what I got into was just like popcorn. I mean, when the pandemic started, it was just like stuck in your house and what do we do? And like downloaded TikTok. I was like, well, let's see what TikTok is, you know, and then did that. And that led to like learning TikTok dances with my wife and stuck in our house. And then one of them was like a Twilight, like that movie series Twilight, to the music of it, which the music is beautiful from that film, I've discovered. And so she was like, let's watch Twilight. And so like binged that, which I can't recommend really, but it was like it was a way to like turn off the world basically.
Yeah.
And then things that I've grown to be really interested in is VR. Like I got a Oculus and I was like, I'm gonna try this out. And you know, it's not quite there yet, but it is interesting as
close.
a potential medium of something interesting. Like to me, I did the VR chat and got really into that. And it kind of reminds me of the feelings that I got when I signed on to AOL for the first time.
Okay.
I'm not sure how old the audience for this is, but you know, in 1995, getting the like America Online disc and putting it in, you're like, I'm actually talking to other people online, and that feeling of excitement is the same feeling I get when I like do the VR and I'm in a VR chat and like some guy in a Mickey Mouse avatar and like somebody else in like a Winnie the Pooh avatar, like, hey, what's up, man? What are you doing? And they start talking to you and you're like, let me take you on an adventure. And they like take you on these weird adventures through portals. And I'm like, this stuff is dope. Something's going to happen with this stuff. And as a filmmaker and artist, I should keep an eye on it.
Have you tried out any of the stories on there yet? Or like
I did the a couple of them, yeah. And it's really interesting. I mean, if it works, it's like not perfect, but there's moments when you're like, if this was really taken up to the next level, it could be really incredible.
Like it's so close.
It's so close. We're on the edge of it. And I wouldn't mind playing around with it, you know. As like a gamer, I'm a total gamer. Always have been. And that's how I started, is I wanted to make video games. And then but what I really wanted to do was just to make the stories and the little videos, the FMVs that played in between gameplay.
And it's interesting that you would say that, because my brother wanted to do video games, but he grew up in like the Atari era. And so but he was just on the cusp, and he was like so excited to start studying video games. And then they're like, oh yeah, now the teams, in Atari's era, it was like I made the game by myself. I spent a couple weeks building it.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays it's like we have a team of 300 people, and
Yeah.
and you're
Exactly.
like a cog in the wheel. And he was like, oh, I don't like that.
You know, my biggest thing that happened over the pandemic is I played this game Stardew Valley,
Okay.
and it was all made by one man
Yeah.
who did the score, who did all the character creation, and it's incredible. You
Have you
should show
seen
your brother that game.
Have you seen Indie Gamer?
It's an indie game, yeah.
No, but have you seen the documentary Indie Gamer?
I haven't.
Okay, there's two of them. There's Indie Gamer and Indie Gamer 2, and they
Mhm.
follow guys just like that who are like, I have no money, I just want to make a video game, and I'm doing everything myself, from like creating the graphics to doing the code to doing the music, and it is fascinating to watch them go.
See, there's some great indie spirit right
Yeah.
there, you know. I experimented with one VR thing. I did a VR music video called
Yeah,
Phantasmagoria
I saw that.
for
Yeah,
my
that was
band Icky Blossom. So me and my creative partner Derek in the band did that, and that was fun. It was like I wrote out what was going to happen and handed it all off to a team to make, and it was my first like experiment in kind of gaming style VR stuff. But like I said, I think ultimately, oh, there's the dogs. Hey, that's my wife. She did a lot of the choreography and producing of Hidden Places.
Boo.
um, so what was I saying? Anyways, yeah, that indie spirit is still alive, but ultimately for me, I still just want to be making feature films and like you said earlier, sort of like pushing the medium and in a new and interesting ways. I feel like if you're going to be a filmmaker, you gotta attempt that in some way.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day.
Yeah, and next time Icky Blossoms come to Toronto, let me know.
Oh yeah, last time we went there, our van broke down and we were stuck in the middle of nowhere in Canada.
Well, if you'd known me, I could have.
I know, I could be like, hey, what's up? It's 2 a.m. We need a ride.
Exactly. Well, that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com, or of course follow us on Twitter at Filmmaker U. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors, OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs.